Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. That verse, Deuteronomy 6:4, tells us that there is one God known as Jehovah, Yahweh. So, if there is one God, then how do we say that there's a Trinity? That Trinity exists. In the other video, we talked about how Scripture demonstrates that there is a separation between the three parts of the Godhead. So how do we know, and how can we talk about things being one when they are three? Well, as Trinitarians, what we say is that there is one God who is one as to His essence, but three as to His person. Now, what is it that we mean by one as to His essence? To understand that, we must separate out what is the essence and what is the attributes of God. So how can we say that God is one as to His essence and three as to His person? What is the essence of God that is one? Well, simply stated, the essence of God is the attributes of God that make up what is essential to His makeup, without which He would not be God anymore. For instance, we have this tree. It's an orange tree, and at certain times of the year it produces oranges. But if it didn't make the fruit, would it still be a tree? Probably so. Lots of trees don't make fruit. Well, if it didn't have these leaves, would it still be a tree? Probably so. There are lots of trees that shed their leaves every year. But if it didn't have branches, would it still be a tree? What about the trunk down there? If it didn't have a trunk, would it still be a tree? Well, the answer to that question is probably not, because if it didn't have a trunk or branches, we wouldn't be calling it a tree. It's the same with God. There are certain things about God that God possesses that make Him God. There are other things that God possesses that are not shared equally among all three parts of the Trinity, but are no less attributes of God. One of those, for example, that is part of the essence of God is eternality. We understand that Jesus was pre-existing. From John 1:1, we know that He was there in the beginning. That whole first chapter of John is dedicated to us understanding the fact that Jesus did not begin at the manger. Jesus never began. Jesus was and is to come. If there was ever a place where God was simply not, and then He started, or if there was ever a time where God was not going to be, then He wouldn't be God, would He? He would be a finite being. He would not possess infinity. He would not possess eternality. Another one is self-existence. God exists on His own. He does not need us. He does not need any part of His creation. He would exist even if we weren't here. He did not create us so that He could continue to exist. It is not my belief in God that makes God exist. He is, in fact, self-existing. He does not need me. If you took any of these things away from God, then He wouldn't be God anymore. If God needed something to exist, then He wouldn't be self-existing and therefore wouldn't be God. He would not be the God who's worthy of our worship. He would be simply another being that is dependent on other things on the planet or in creation. So just like this tree, we can say it's a tree because it possesses the essence of a tree. It possesses trunk, a woody nature, branches, and leaves. With God, we can say that all three members of the Godhead are deity because they possess all of the essence of God. They share in the essence equally. But yet, they are three personages. We demonstrated in the video on the Trinity that these three personages are actually separate, but they share one essence, as Deuteronomy 6:4 tells us. Now, this week, in your discussion board posts and in your papers, and while you're discussing this amongst yourselves and while you're doing your reading on your own, keep in mind the idea that there are parts of God that are essential to His makeup and parts of God that are not shared equally among all three members of the Trinity. That is what we know as the essence of God and the attributes of God. And that is how we as Trinitarians can say we worship one God, because there is one God as to His essence and three as to His person.